Hi Equals, it's Kim. And today I want to talk about parenting. Am I an expert in parenting? No. Am I a parent? Yes. Have I heard a whole lot of stories about, well, parenting gone right and about parenting not gone so right, particularly when it comes to LGBT young people. That's what I talk about here. LGBT issues, including those of young people. My number one premise. A parent's job is to love their child unconditionally. Any other question that you have about parenting, I say refer back to rule number one. Love your child unconditionally. And this includes their identity. All across time, we know that parents have expectations of their children. Sometimes they are unhealthy expectations. Sometimes they are narcissistic expectations. All kinds of stuff happens in a child-parent relationship. We were all children. We all had some sort of parent relationship, including a null parent relationship. That's an experience as well. So we all know. We all know there's stuff that happens. I'm going to talk to you from scenarios I've heard from LGBT young people over the past about 12, 13 years. There are parents who have certain expectations of who their children will be as adults. Some of this could be an expectation of a certain level of what the parent defines as holiness. This could be is usually around how a child behaves sexually, what their marital relationship is like, whether they stay in a marriage, whether they get divorced, whether they're sexually active before they are married. All of these kinds of issues kind of come into play around this whole idea of trying to push a child towards some definition of holiness. Involved in this can be issues of a parent's being worried about a child's afterlife, or whether everybody in the family will be together again in heaven, or whatever you consider to be the afterlife. And for some people, these things are really, really important issues. There comes a time, however, when you have to kind of say to yourself, what was my number one rule as a parent? Was to love my child unconditionally. All right, which leads us to the question of what does love mean? Because I know there's a lot of parents out there who think that love encompasses some kind of tough love as well. I've known young people who've come out to their parents, whose parents then have immediately kicked them out or cut them off financially. We hear this often from college freshmen. They've stayed closeted their entire high school time. They go to college. They get around people who are more accepting and affirming. They've come out to people. They've maybe joined a university LGBT support group of some sort. And now they go home at Thanksgiving or Christmas and they come out to their parents. Now, sometimes this is just well-meaning. The child wants their parent to know. Sometimes it is actually retaliatory. So let me give you a couple examples of that. The child comes home at Thanksgiving, feels that they have not been truly fully honest with their parent about either who they are, so their gender identity, or who they love, so their sexual orientation, and they decide to take the opportunity at a holiday, which, by the way, is a highly stressful time for everyone, to come out to their parents, and sometimes it goes horribly wrong. And that college freshman finds themselves cut off from financial help at college. The parents pull that financial help in some sort of thought that the child will renounce their sexual orientation or gender identity in order to get that financial backing again. Sometimes the child does, and they get that financial backing, and then they wait until they're out of college. What it doesn't actually do is change the child's sexual orientation or gender identity. It just sends them back into the closet, at least as far as their parents are concerned. If you are that kind of parent, you might want to think about the level of your relationship with your child. The other way that can go is the parents and the child are having some sort of argument unconnected to sexual orientation or gender identity at Thanksgiving or Christmas, and the child uses their sexual orientation or gender identity as a weapon to get even with a parent for something that they feel was unfair because they know the parent will react badly. This is an unfortunate circumstance, but we have heard these stories before, and it does happen. We always, if given the opportunity, counsel a young person to consider their safety first. And that's not just only their physical safety, which is also very important, right? Because sometimes the family reacts with abuse, but as well as their emotional, their financial, their security, as well, for as long as they're dependent on their parents, that needs to be taken into account. So when we're talking about bills like HB 658 here in Ohio that would require teachers and doctors and counselors, etc., to out a child to their parent, that doesn't take into account that safety issue, and that for some young people, whether it's financial, emotional, physical, security is at stake. And if they aren't out to their parents, there's probably a really good reason for it. We've even heard of sexual abuse of particularly young women who come out as bisexual or lesbian, where a male relative decides that they just don't know what good sex is. And they're going to prove to them what good sex is. Whoever thought that rape was a good way to convince a lesbian that they weren't attracted to women? Come on, people. Sorry, rant over. All right, so some other issues with parenting. Some parenting is really, really good. Most parents already have some idea if their child is gender non-conforming or is gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Usually a parent has some inkling. They may not want to hear it, they may not want to face it, but generally they have some indication. It's pretty hard to hide that when you live with somebody for 18 years, 24/7. When coming out goes well, the parent says something along the lines of, son, daughter, I love you. It doesn't matter to me which gender you identify with or who you love. I love you. And I will always love you. Then that parent could say something like, I really don't understand gender identity and I really don't understand being gay or lesbian or bisexual, but I'm willing to learn. And then there's support groups for that. There's PFLAGs around the state, whether you find one actually physically located near you or whether you, get involved with a group online through Facebook. I know they exist. You can look up PFLAG National, and they will tell you, and the website will tell you where there are affiliate chapters around the country. There are a number of them here in Ohio. And through those local chapters, or even possibly through the national, you'll be able to find online support if you can't find a local group. If your child comes out to you and you're confused and you don't understand, love your child and then be open to learning. My own situation, I had parents who were, my dad went to seminary when I was, after I became an adult. And I knew that he had written a whole paper on the Bible and homosexuality, and I knew that his thesis was affirming of LGBT people. So I had a pretty good idea how he was going to react. My mother wasn't totally sure. My sister's a little bit more, sorry, Jackie, a little more conservative in a religious sort of way, attends a more conservative church. Wasn't totally positive how she would respond, but I would like to say that my family all responded very, very well. I think I've said before that my mother was a little concerned that maybe she'd eaten a little too much pizza, so I had to reassure her that had nothing to do, the amount of pizza she ate had nothing to do with my sexual orientation. My sister, she had a 3-month-old baby. She booked a flight. She came to visit me the very next day, or within days, and helped me support through the transition I made in my life at that time. And I appreciate all of that to this day. So my family was affirming. I was also an adult. I didn't come out till I was 36. All young people need their parents to be affirming of their identity as they move through adolescence. For some transgender children, even earlier than that, when a child comes out at 3 or 4 or 5, and a parent doesn't have to immediately respond with, yes, let's plan for your later transition. But if the child expresses a desire to be called by usually it's a very closely related name to theirs, a more androgynous form of their own name, why not? We call Richard Rich, we call Samuel Sam, we call Samantha Sam. Why would that be a big difference? If the child actually wants us to refer to them as the pronouns of the identity with which they identify, no big deal. And maybe it's just something that you do at home. It'd be great if it was something you could do out in the world and with a larger extended family. But even if it's just something that gets done at home, this is a way to affirm your child. And there's nothing permanent done in usage of pronouns or names. If the child wants to dress or play with toys, they're not associated with the gender that they were assigned at birth. Does that really matter? I know some parents go, well, what will people think? Well, that's people's problem. Yours, again, we'll refer to rule number 1, love your child unconditionally. What the rest of the world thinks is their problem, not yours. That's the ideal, right? We do have parents who respond more negatively, and they refuse to listen to their child's desire for the usage of a certain name or pronouns or the way that they want to dress. They send that child to a religious leader whose idea of helping that child is to shame them, to tell them how they're hurting their family, to tell them that if they just get their mind right, then they will be happy again with the gender that they were assigned at birth. All of this kind of just sort of negative thinking, and what often happens is the child begins to believe that my parents would be better off without me. I am causing them pain, and because there is nothing I can do about my gender identity or my sexual orientation, I will simply remove myself from my parents' lives. This could just mean running away. This can also mean completing suicide. On a happy note, if you remember rule number 1, love your child unconditionally, that it's okay to admit that you don't understand everything, but to be open to learning and to loving your child. Most of the rest of the issues will take care of themselves. I'm not a child psychologist. I'm not an expert. I'm just coming from the stories that I've heard from the many LGBT people and LGBT young people who I've interacted with over the last 10 or 12 years. I'd love to hear your comments, how you feel about this issue. And if you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. And I'd love it if you'd hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell also, so that you can be notified every time I put up a new video. Have a great day, equals. See you later.